Chris Hunter with Collective Thought Media, and I am here today to go over another exciting DeFi project. This time we are looking at Polaris Finance, which is built on the Aurora and NEAR ecosystem. This project is an algorithmically pegged stablecoin, and some of you may be familiar already with typical stablecoins such as Tether, USDT, or USDC, which are pegged to the value of $1. What makes these type of algorithmically pegged stablecoins a little bit different than the stablecoins that we're used to that are pegged to the value of the American dollar is that these particular stablecoins are pegged to the value of another growth coin. Now, this all started back with Basis and their implementation of a three-part coin system that allows their pegged coin to remain pegged as long as the protocol follows the procedures that are required for it to maintain peg. Now, this has resulted in the explosion of algorithmically pegged stablecoins primarily on the Phantom network and the Tomb Finance algorithmically pegged stablecoin. All of those derivatives of Tomb Finance are collectively known as Tomb forks. And essentially, the way that they function is you have three important coins. The first coin we're going to talk about is the coin that is pegged to the value of another coin. That is called, in this case, the pegged coin. So here we can see that Polaris has implemented Polar. Polar is pegged to the value of $1. Now, it doesn't mean it's always going to be at peg, and one of these projects, and many of these projects actually, it is possible for them to fail completely, in which case they drop fully under peg and they never return. That is possible. So I just want everyone, first of all, to be clear that just because they are designed to stay at peg doesn't mean that they will. It is not a guaranteed factor. It is something that the community has to work towards, and people have to make intelligent choices in order to keep the peg tokens at peg. But with that said, when this particular pegged token, when it is above peg, meaning that when it is above 1.01 NEAR, there is another token which is generally referred to as the bank token, and that bank token is going to print more of the peg token. So when, for instance, again, in this case, when Polar, which is pegged to NEAR, when it is above the value of NEAR, the bank will print more and it will cause the price to go down. Now, as it prints more, that's also how you get rewarded. So there is an APR associated with the printing of the pegged token. So if we go to Sunrise, which is in this case the Polar Sunrise, this is the bank that prints more Polar. If they are above peg, which they currently are not, you are able to gain rewards from that. And so the APR in this case, when they are above peg, the APR is about 3,000% APR. So we can see that when this is printing and when it is above peg, it will print at 3,100% APR. So if we take our calculator and we just do some quick math here, we divide 3,188 by 365, that's about 8.5% a day when it is printing. Now, it will not print every day, and you will not get that rate for an entire year. So it's not really reasonable to expect to get that actual sort of APR return over the course of a year. Everything here is flexible and adjusts based on a variety of different factors, but it adjusts algorithmically. So essentially, as there's more total value locked in a lot of these pools, it will print less APR. But the general idea is that when it's over peg, the bank prints, thereby deflating the price of the peg token. Now, when it's under peg, okay, when the value of Polar drops less than the value of NEAR, you have the option to buy bonds. Now, what this means is that you can essentially buy the peg token at a discount, and when it rises back up above peg, you can then cash in your bond token and redeem the difference between the two values. Also, when you buy a bond token, you buy it with Polar, and when you buy it, it burns Polar, thereby reducing the circulation of the number of Polar, and it increases the price back up. So as you can see, there are specific mechanisms that are designed to keep the peg token at peg. again, just want to reiterate, it does not mean that it will always happen. It does not mean that this project will, that any tomb fork will maintain peg forever. They can go under peg and stay there forever. That could happen. A lot of people ask, oh, but it's, or they say, oh, but it's, you know, inexperienced people that aren't used to this type of system will say, oh, it's designed to be a peg, there's nothing to worry about. No, you can still lose all your money, or you can still lose a significant portion of your funds, and these projects can and do die. So please keep that in mind. With that said, we're going to shift over to Polaris Finance and what makes them special and stand out amongst a lot of the other tomb forks that are out there currently. Most tomb forks are built on the Phantom network, and they are pegged to the price of one Phantom. What makes Polaris a little different is they are the first tomb fork or algorithmically pegged stablecoin on the Aurora chain. So they are one of the first DeFi protocols that adds utility like this to Aurora and NEAR, which is great. Also, they're relatively new, unknown, and they have a lot of growth potential. So this could be a great long-term play if more people come into the tomb fork DeFi space. Another thing that makes Polaris unique is the fact that they are not a single token peg. They have Polar, which pegs to NEAR. They have now also introduced LUNAR, which pegs to Luna. So there's the potential to gain more liquidity due to the fact that there are users of NEAR and there are users of Luna who can now come into this system, and they can now peg and provide liquidity and earn great APR no matter which token you're into. They also will be adding an Aurora peg token very soon as well, which again could potentially add more liquidity as you gain users of each of the individual tokens who want to get these juicy APRs. If you're interested in trying out Polaris Finance and you want to get into the system, the best way that I recommend to do that is to go directly to polarisfinance.io, and then you want to click on, if you're interested in staking NEAR and Polar, you would click Buy Polar. At that point, you are kicked over to try Solaris, and you have the option now, using MetaMask, to pick NEAR or whatever token you'd like, and you can swap 50% of that for Polar. Once you go ahead and do that, and in this case, I'll just do a little bit just to demonstrate how this works. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to swap 0.75 NEAR for 0.7 Polars. I'm going to hit swap. I'm going to confirm the swap. MetaMask will come up here. We'll confirm that. And I have now taken some of my NEAR and turned a portion of it into Polar. Once you have some of your NEAR turned into Polar, you have two options. You can either directly deposit on polarisfinance.io under Dawn. You can go to Polar NEAR LP, View and Stake, and once here, you would click on Provide Liquidity for Polar NEAR. This is now going to allow me to input what I just swapped. So I'm going to take my 0.7 Polar, and I have my 0.7 NEAR, and I'm going to supply those to the liquidity pool. Once you've done that, give it a minute or two, then you can come back to the Polar NEAR liquidity pool on Polaris Finance, update the page, and you now have the option to add that portion into this pool. You can hit max and hit confirm, that will then add it. Another option is to use Vaporwave. Vaporwave is a liquidity pool auto compounder, and what this will do is it will automatically redirect your earnings back into your liquidity pool so that they are automatically compounded multiple times a day, which ultimately results in a higher annual yield. So what I'm going to do here is, because I have already added the liquidity, I've got the two tokens, I added the liquidity. You can see I have 698.7 of these liquidity pool tokens. So I'm going to deposit all of that. And we'll hit confirm in MetaMask. And you can now see that I have deposited that additional amount of $16.85 worth of liquidity pool tokens into that pool. And you can see your wallet balance right here will soon come over and it will appear in the pool, the vault balance instead. So we can now see I've deposited $200 worth of NEAR and Polar onto this auto compounder. That gets me about 1.4% daily return, or about 19,000% annual. But again, keep in mind, it's unlikely that you're going to see that amount of actual returns over the course of a year. So that is how I would go about adding NEAR into one of these liquidity pools. Okay, if you guys wanted to add from the Luna side instead, it's a very similar process. What you would do is you would come to the Polar Finance homepage, click on Buy LUNAR. You would then import that custom token, and you would trade some of your at Luna, or I believe that's like wrapped Luna. You would trade half of that for LUNAR, and then you would go through. You would then go into Dawn, you would go to the liquidity pool, you would click on Provide Liquidity, you would add your 2 tokens to the liquidity pool, just like we did for Polar, and then you would come back here, at which point it would give you the option to add your Luna liquidity pool tokens, just like NEAR. It's essentially the same exact process as adding into the NEAR Polar liquidity pool. However, in this case, you are simply adding from Luna and LUNAR. And again, just to touch a little bit about some of the advantages, if you're familiar with liquidity farming, then you understand it's one of the best ways in DeFi to get extremely competitive APRs between 1 and 15% per day. The higher the return, the higher the risk, as always. Now, what's nice about entering into a liquidity pool with a pegged pair is that, in theory, if the protocol works, if the community does what it needs to, this price of Polar is not going to change too much from the value of NEAR. So that limits your impermanent loss or divergence loss, and it also limits the potential to buy into a liquidity pair where one of those tokens is extremely volatile and maybe drops 50, 60, 70% a day for multiple days in a row. That can happen. When you're using a pegged stablecoin as a liquidity pair, it's a little, in my opinion, it is a little bit more of a safer bet because the 2 tokens are, in theory, going to stay relatively close to each other in value. Now, another option is you could also provide a liquidity pair between NEAR and S-Polar. S-Polar is the growth token of the ecosystem, which means S-Polar can go up and down and have extreme volatility. It can have high gains and lows throughout the day, month, year. So unlike the stable version, this is not pegged to anything. And as you can see, it's currently worth 8 NEAR. Some of these tokens, if you get your timing right, you can easily see a 3 to 5x return. What I have noticed is that a lot of the Tomb Fork style coins they always start off with initial extreme high token value for the growth coin. It will drop down significantly, and then a lot of people will jump in to the pool at that point. What I have found is that there's usually a second bottom on most of these. They will hit what is the actual bottom. That could be anywhere between $5 and $25. And then they will, as people see that has gone down, and maybe the project gains a little momentum, people buy into the project to get those APRs, and this growth token can shoot back up between 3 to 10x almost regularly. If you look at the charts for S-Polar, we can see that there have been multiple opportunities for significant growth here. So let's just take a look at when S-Polar bottomed out at around $18. Okay, we can see that from March 6th, we bottomed out at $18, and then on March 20th, just 2 weeks later, we were up to $154. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you try to time the market on these, but this is a trend I have noticed, that it is extremely common that you will always have this drop at first, and then people will think they're at the bottom, around $90 or $100. In fact, there's another bottom, and then you go back to that same level again. So just something to keep an eye on if you get into Tomb Forks and you want to try to minimize your losses. You do not want to buy in when this coin is worth $250 and then it drops down to $16. That will not be a good time for you. So keep in mind that these growth coins on these Tomb Forks can have a low bottom. You want to wait until you find that, and then enter in, or dollar cost average in your investment. You know, if you put in $100 a day for a few days, and if you notice the trend is a strong bearish decline, stop buying. Wait for the bottom. Wait for it to bottom out. If it hits an all-time low of around, I find the $10 to $30 mark for these, that's probably as low as it's ever going to get. There's a solid chance you may go back up to 100 from that $18 mark, okay? So that's my strategy with tomb forks. Find the real bottom, and then that is when you enter. Do not enter into a tomb fork here. Do not enter into a tomb fork here, okay? Wait for the bottom and then enter. So if right now you're thinking about getting in, I would wait for this to potentially bottom out a little, see what happens. It's at $90. People that are very bullish on S-Polar are predicting a $200 to $300 range shortly. So I wouldn't wait too long to get in if it was me, but please do your own research, determine your own level of appropriate risk, and try to enter into the liquidity pool, not at a high, not at an all-time high, okay? Certainly not at $400 or $500 during the first couple of weeks of the project. Wait for it to bottom out, enter in, and then I do believe there's strong potential for profit there. So guys, just wrapping up again here on Polaris Finance and what they're doing. They currently have 2 algorithmically pegged stablecoins, one to NEAR, one to LUNA. There is expansion plans to add a 3rd pegged stablecoin to Aurora in the future. I think that this is, in my opinion, a very strong project that has excellent leadership. You can join their Discord. I'll put a link to that as well, to an invite to that. And you can see there are a lot of very smart people here behind the scenes making this happen. There's a lot of people in the DeFi space that are active on their Discord. And you can see there's only 900 members currently. So at this is an opportunity to be into a project that is still new and still has tons of growth potential.